here. So today we'll talk about the navigation menu and just really all the menus inside of Canvas, and then we'll also discuss any Spring issues or other Canvas concerns. I wanted to mention I do have a video. I will share this in the chat here, and I'll be sure to link this in the video I create from today. And this is just a short YouTube video on using the Canvas navigation menu. And for me, I've been teaching in Canvas for all these years, but one of the confusing things about Canvas is just the fact that you have so many different menus to choose from. You have this menu here on the right that I generally say, you're only using if you're importing stuff, if you're choosing your home page. It's a lot of setup stuff. You can also click on the new analytics from here and click announcements from here. I probably would just do it from the announcements tool. So there's that menu on the right that typically, in my class, I don't use a lot of. You have your main left-hand navigation menu, and this is just your account settings. And if you're watching this, you won't have an admin button. Some of this is dependent on your level of access in terms of Canvas. Everybody should have now the new Timely Care menu here, and this is brand new. You can get started, and you can access virtual health and also mental health services for students. We're offering this, and we're now offering it for part-time faculty as well. So definitely, take advantage of that and staff. And it's just a great opportunity. I think I'm going to have to reload my... So you can also access your Canvas Studio from here, which is super handy. It allows you to add new videos and to curate your collections and all that kind of fun stuff. Canvas Commons is also found here. And I've mentioned before, I'll probably do an announcement before we start spring classes. But if you want to find our Student Suite modules that I've created, you can search by LTCC, and then you'll find the two here, Student Suite, which is the class policies, and then the student resources. So if you want to take advantage of those, you could click on them here, and again, it's super easy to import into your class by just clicking the import button. So this menu is super handy. It's like your global menu for you as a user. It's your dashboard to access your courses. If you want to go in and change your avatar picture or look at anything specific to your user account, you would do it from this menu. And then, of course, you could also click on your calendar and your dashboard, which will allow you to get to your classes. And then probably most useful would be the inbox. This is where you could instantly access your inbox messages. If there are new messages, and mine say 8, and typically it's an announcement, like a global announcement from a few years back that I haven't clicked on. So these aren't like new messages, but it'll just show you if you have new ones, it'll show you just like on your favorite email program how many messages you have. So that is your global navigation account menu, if you want to call it. I always forget the exact names for these. For your course menu, of course, this is very specific to each of your classes. So every time you teach a class, you will have different menus that reflect what you have set up. And to change these, everything that you see here, both to change the order of these and what's actually included, we'll click on our settings menu. And by the way, as I mentioned in this course navigation video that I did, if you're ever wondering what the little icon is with the eyeball there, that's just showing you that you can still access that in your course menu, but your students cannot. And the reason for that is if you have pages accessible to students and they click on pages, they can basically click on every single page in the class, and it gets super confusing because they're not organized in any kind of order. And that's why we always kind of message that if you use your module view, that's the best way to aggregate and to curate and organize all the pages in your Canvas class. So again, when you see one of these eyeballs with the gray and the slash, that just means that they're not visible to your students, but you can still view them, of course, because it's handy for you to log onto your class and to immediately click on your pages without having to dig for that. So that's the reason that you see that eyeball icon there. So to change these, we'll just click on our settings menu or settings icon or tab at the bottom. And this is probably one of the main areas here that you might access. This is your course details area. So this would be everything from your, it'll have information about your class, if it has a sub account. Some of this that you might be seeing now, you may not have access to. as I have admin level privileges, I might be able to change the file storage for your class, but you won't be able to do that. If you ever have questions on any of this and you are trying to find something, or you cannot find, a particular thing, or you want to change a setting and you don't have access to it, email Michael Miguel at the college and he could certainly set you up on that. I also want to advise you to click on the more options at the bottom, and you will sometimes find things that are hidden that maybe you do need to access, like the number of, it's not letting me do this, and maybe that's because it's, no, I have to click that. So if you want to display more than 3 announcements on your page, starting at the home page, this will allow you to do that. This will have different features for your grades and so forth. So I definitely recommend when you're new on Canvas to check out that more options settings, because it's kind of counterintuitive to have gradebook information or settings here on your course details. And it's just one of those things in Canvas where you sometimes find certain features hidden in areas, and that's a good reason to just poke around and see what's available here. Most of the stuff you won't have to set here because it's definitely not like paramount to teaching your class. Whether or not you have your Creative Commons attribution setting on here is not super important. It just probably affects if you're searching for this class on Canvas Commons and you share it to Canvas Commons, it's just helpful to people. So some of this may not be specific to your students. It might be more for sharing this class, let's say, to the Canvas Commons area. If you want to change things like the image in your class, you can remove the image and change the image here. So course details is really kind of self-explanatory. The sections detail, we sometimes click on this if we're changing our enrollment dates for our students. This is actually not allowing me to, I guess it will here if I hit edit section. The start and end date, sometimes if you have that option to change that, and I don't know, sometimes this gets disabled for you as a user, but that's probably the one area where you would go in and adjust things at the section level. Again, even though you only have one section, sometimes you may end up clicking on that just to make that change. You're not going to really get into apps. If you have apps that are specific for a publisher like Cengage or McGraw-Hill, and you don't have access to that when you click on it, you could reach out to Michael Miguel, and we can often set this at the institution level. We have to put in a few keys and numbers to make it work for the college. So most of these you probably don't need, but if you ever have one that you need, and I don't know why all these icons are not showing up today. It's kind of weird, but most of them are missing. But definitely reach out to Michael Miguel, and he could help you out with any of that. But I want to focus then on the navigation menu. So when you click on the navigation menu, and again, we got to this by clicking on our home page, clicking on settings, and then clicking on navigation. This is where you choose what appears in the left navigation menu versus what doesn't appear. Anything down here will not appear, and it's pretty clear. Drag items here to hide from students. So if I don't want a certain tool, and this doesn't matter for this class, I'm just going to pull something out of here like NetTutor, and the reason is this is not a current class. So now you see NetTutor is here, so it'll be disabled, but I do have to scroll to the bottom of the screen, and I always have to hit save. There are some places in Canvas where you don't have to hit save. This is one where you do. Once you hit save, it will be official, and then it will repopulate this menu here, and we should then see that reflected here if that was removed. And I forget where it was in here, but it should be now removed. And indeed, we see that NetTutor is down here. So all I have to do again is just drag any of these down to here that I don't want. If I want these to reappear in my navigation menu here, all I do is drag them above, and I have to hit save again. And now we should see attendance appearing. And I think it does it. It's not alphabetical per se. I'm not entirely sure how it decides on the order, but it's in that order now. What I could then do is go in and change that. So if I want attendance to appear second from the top, I just drag and drop. Sometimes I have to do it twice, and there it is. And let me hit save, and now it'll appear second from the top. So that's really handy, and I think probably more emphasis needs to be placed on the course navigation menu, what appears there and where do things appear. And my personal preference on this is I think sometimes we have too much stuff cluttering this menu. If you get into user interface design in the world of apps or even in computer programs, one of the challenges is sometimes you have to dive deep as a user to find things. And I think it's easier, for me at least as a user, if I have less things to click on. So my personal preference would be when you decide on your navigation items, maybe only choose the most important ones to appear here for your students, and then that way you're not cluttering up this navigation menu. As well, maybe you come up with a system that makes the most sense for you that emphasizes the things that students need to access. For me, I would have the syllabus probably second from the top. I don't really do attendance, so I'm going to get that out of there. I don't do chat. I'm probably going to put my syllabus second from the top, and then modules is my second most important item. So I'm going to save that, and then once I click on this, you'll see that I have syllabus here and then modules. And keep in mind, anytime I want to view as a student, and I'm wondering, oh yeah, it'll let me do it, even though the class is not live. And then what's nice about that is I'm not going to see those, like the pages that I can see on my instructor view with the grayed out eyeball slashed. I don't see that here because it's under student view. So this gives me a sense of the clarity that maybe a student would have or not based on what's available. So that seems pretty good there. That's not a lot of stuff. I can go in and do more of a deep dive and then decide a little bit later what exactly I want to appear before I publish my class. So I think, really working with this before your class starts, it's a good reminder for our spring classes. It's a great idea. If you see this evaluation kit, the evaluation kit is if your class is being reviewed. Many of our part-time faculty get reviewed. You always will be contacted by your peer evaluator and or dean. Typically during the quarter, if you're being evaluated in the spring quarter, they'll reach out to you in the first few weeks. And we want that to appear there because then the students can access it and give you feedback on your class. Full-time faculty, same thing. If you're coming up for your tenure review, most of our full-time faculty, when they're untenured, are reviewed once per year, one quarter. So in that quarter, this would also appear. And I don't think you have the option to disable it. But again, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to Michael Miguel. The LTCC Cranium Cafe Virtual Services is pretty handy to have here. A lot of our students that interact with financial aid or their counselors often use Cranium Cafe, and this way they can go onto it from your Canvas class, book an appointment, and it's super easy to use and access. So again, I think anything that you don't think is really important for your class, remove from here. If you want the Canvas student guide, you could leave it. If you don't, and let's say you have your own video tutorial focused on Canvas, maybe you say I'll clean it up a little bit, so I'll remove that. I don't use Google Drive, I'll remove that. And then kind of just start to really, base this on only what the students absolutely need to see in their navigation area of Canvas. So that's kind of, I just wanted to go through all the menus. This is not necessarily a really complicated thing, but wanted to mention it today. And then again, I can share with any of you this Canvas navigation menu video that has a little more of that information that I discussed today in a little more depth in some areas. So, Justin, questions or concerns you have about your own classes or any tips you have on how you set this up in Canvas as far as like the order of the items in your menu?
Yeah, so in terms of, the first class I taught initially, I wasn't really aware of these features of hiding and so on. So I had everything there.
Yeah.
And my class did get reviewed, and that was one of the best feedback I got, thankfully.
Oh, good. Okay.
When for your next class, make sure you hide most of the stuff. And so I did much better this time around. This time around, I hid almost everything except for announcements. Well, of course, home announcements I do first because I want them to see very important updates about the coursework. Syllabus is next. I think I have modules after that. And then I have Studio on there because I require them to use that for one of their presentations. And then the Cranium Cafe and some other important resources.
Yeah.
Grades, I think, is there. But one thing I did was I intentionally hid like some of these links to like discussions or quizzes. And the reason I did that was because, there's two reasons. One, you mentioned about not being too cluttered.
Yep.
And so that was helpful. The other reason is I don't want students to be tempted to just log in, like if they know they have a quiz due or discussion, just click on that and then do it without genuinely looking at the content. So by forcing them to go to modules and to scroll down to the current week and then to click on the discussion or quiz from there, it kind of forces them to maybe see other aspects of things that week, maybe another assignment that they might have overlooked, and kind of encourages them maybe to actually go with the content that week. So that was another intentional thing I did, and that helped to also just have only a few items that are useful. But yeah, in terms of order, I did announcements at the top, and then similar to what you said after that, syllabus, modules.
That's really good. And yeah, that second reason, I'm glad you mentioned, I totally forgot that, is it's not just clutter, like you're saying, it's controlling the flow of information. And again, we say, like, if students click on modules, you can really set up based on the prereqs here. Again, you can go into every single module and set up your prerequisites so that you can decide the order in which people complete things. One thing after another. You got to do quiz 1 before quiz 2 or discussion 1 before discussion 2. You could do date setup where you tell students they can only complete the work according to your own calendar. So controlling that flow and navigation of your course material is great. And I wanted to mention, I'm not one of these persons, but let's look on Commons. And if we don't find it there, I can look at an LTCC class. But one other thing you can do is look for a Canvas. I'm kind of interested in a navigation menu. I don't think, Justin, you don't have buttons on your class, do you, on the front page where you click the buttons to access everything, like the modules?
Yeah, I do actually.
Oh, you do?
So I create, that was the other piece of feedback I got.
Nice.
For my first, which was, I got really good feedback. And this, I think it was another part-time faculty too that teaches like math or something. So I was like, it was really impressive. I had to get feedback. One of them was to have a really good landing page, homepage. And the suggestions were all, one of them was make it your announcements page or something. That way they have to kind of see updates, or make it your modules page or something else. But what I decided to do is just create, a little bit more of an aesthetically engaging landing page with a few buttons. Again, so the buttons I have there are for like modules.
Can I pull that up? Is that okay?
Yeah, mythology is the one.
Great.
Let's see if it
shows. Here we go.
Yeah, there you go. So
nice.
So the first one is just a graphic. You can't really click on it.
Yeah.
I was thinking about making some of those items with the next list, but I also didn't want that to be too cluttered. So it was just more of like kind of upfront reminders. But those buttons to the bottom of it, holding up.
I love it. Yeah.
So announcements, modules, and so again the three most important things.
Yeah. And let me just show that for.
You still the ordering I was referring to earlier. You can see it there.
Yeah. And this is good because look, so we're on student view, so very clean here. So they can't click on discussions or pages, so they can click on modules. Yeah, that's great.
Because then they're going to see stuff like my lecture videos there, or the primary text reading, secondary text reading.
Yep.
They're going to see other assignments due, like they had a major assignment due this time. It was a presentation outline they had to do. So they might have missed that if they just were in the habit of going, I got to do my discussion.
Yeah.
So they just skip over that.
And this is great. And another good reminder here for good course design, I'm seeing here, I do the same thing. To create like a lot of symmetry or similarity, whatever you want to call it, between modules. So we all have our own system. So for me, I do kind of the same thing. I put the topic here. And sometimes I might, you could make, this is just a header, so there's no content here, as you see when you scroll over. You could put the topic in week 6. You could put, a colon and then the topic there, or you could do it this way. And then you have, similarity here. So every time you click on a module, the first thing you see after the topic is the reading, and then the text reading, the media task, discussion, quiz, and so forth. So it has a similar order or structure to it. I do the same thing in my class, and I think it's very easy for students then to find stuff with every module. So that's another great reminder, is to really have your modules organized in a way that it's just going to be easy for students to navigate every week. And I'm sure that was intentional, right? That wasn't accidental, Justin?
That's correct. That was intentional.
Yeah.
So I do that. that's also the way my brain works too. Mm-hmm. It's very, I want things kind of standardized, especially for students.
Yeah.
But actually, I got a lot of, not just one or two, like I got a significant amount of positive feedback from students in the first survey last term, specifically about that, about how it's extremely easy to navigate and follow and so on. So I was very pleased about that, and that was very reassuring.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of my little obsessions were actually practically helpful for the students.
Mm-hmm. No, great. Great. It's always great when you hear that from students. You're doing something right if they can actually use it. And again, I really encourage us to think about user design. I have friends who do. A friend who teaches this out at I'm forgetting the university out in Idaho, but I had a chance to sit in his classes, and the students were actually doing prototyping, and they had to create an app. And one of the things they did on this app was to create very clear, visually attractive but easy to navigate things for their mock app. And it wasn't a ton of stuff. It wasn't a lot of menu diving. It was like this. It was clicking on modules, and then you get to all the content. So I think that's really important, because we do have a lot of students sometimes that struggle with technology, and we shouldn't assume that students will have the patience or ability to understand what all this is here. And again, we're seeing all these now. This is a great example of all those grayed out icons. So when Justin logs onto his class, he needs to be able to click on people and files and pages, but he doesn't want the students to do it. So I love the design on the Canvas side of user interface for faculty, because you can still access all this. It's just not visible to the students. And again, anytime you want to see that, click on your student view icon, and then you see that all those disappear. So the students do not see those same things that the faculty member sees. So I think it's just really handy to have that. The other thing I wanted to show, if you're looking at this class that Justin has set up, if I click the edit button here, if you're wondering how to do this, it's pretty easy to do it. And by the way, a couple of you out there, reach out to Michael Miguel. There was a tool, I think it's still available, but it's going away. It's called City Labs, what's the name of it? Design Plus or something like that. And it was a way to create somewhat easily these buttons on your homepage. I think that's going away because it's not a free service. But maybe Justin, talk us through, how did you... and these are graphics, and I won't change these, but it has the link. So what he's done here is he's set up the link inside of Canvas that you see here. How did you actually create these buttons? Could you walk us through that?
Yeah, sure. So I used canva.com.
Oh, great. Yep.
Which is a free website. You just have to get an account. That's great because it stores everything there for you. You basically just create all sorts of things. Graphics, you can create slides, banners, so on and so forth. There it is right there.
Yeah.
So I created those buttons as images. And it was very easy because once I kind of got the color and the little design down.
Okay, great.
And everything, then I basically just changed the wording when I showed. Like go to announcements, go to syllabus, and so on. And then so from there, so I basically created a graphic and just saved it. And you can see there are kind of small graphics. Sometimes if they get too big, you have to be careful about what file type you save it as and what size you save it as.
Right.
A couple times it was too big and I was having some trouble with that uploading. So anyway, so pretty simple. You could use other software, but basically create the image. And then when you go to the edit box like you had there, you were editing the thing. I just added the image. There's an option there on the top of the toolbar for adding images. So I added the image, browse for my
right.
And then the linking part was really so I thought it was going to be complicated, HTML or something.
No.
But really, if you just click on the image, it shows you selected the image there in Canvas. And then I just clicked in the toolbox above. You have a little option there for hyperlinks. I think it's the little.
Oh yeah, right, yeah. I don't want to mess yours up.
Yeah, that's okay. But anyway, so basically click on the image.
Yeah, this.
Just like that, how you selected it. And then I click the hyperlink image, and that's it. And you just, it asks you if you use the arrow next to it instead of clicking on it.
Yeah.
The arrow asks you if you want to add like an external link, which would be something outside of Canvas, or an internal link. And if you do internal link, it puts a drop down of all your other pages that you already have. So you can just navigate on the right and find your announcements page or modules page, whatever, and click on that, and that will create an internal hyperlink.
Yeah, exactly.
Your own page.
Yeah, that's super easy to do.
A complicated explanation. It's actually significantly easier than how long it took you to explain it. But
no,
picture,
that's great.
Put the picture there and then click on it. And
yeah. And this has a very, it looks like a shield graphic, right? Or like a, what do you call it in British society where they have the coat of arms or the...
Yeah. So for this, Canva is incredibly helpful because you can just search images. So, this class is on mythology, and actually I geared it to make it more of a world mythology. But, we start off with Greek and Roman mythology. Most people think mythology. So I intentionally geared my images towards that. That was a statue of Athena, right there on the page. Yeah. So I would type something like Greek in there, and get all sorts of pictures or designs, and then you can have some fun with it. Yeah, you can customize it however you want. Yeah. So that one that you saw there with the design there, that was the little buttons. I totally customized that, just by picking my own gold background. Mm-hmm. I found the design, I think it was black and white originally or something, and I just kind of changed the colors. So it was a lot of fun. It's fun. It was fun for me, and the whole time I'm creating, I'm just thinking, what is it going to be aesthetically?
That's awesome. I'll just and by the way, just so I don't forget, I do have a video on Canva, kind of a walkthrough of the whole site. I'll find that once I find it, I'll link that, but that's available too. So great tips there. And I was just going to say that, I don't want to forget what Justin said is really key. So once you have, obviously this looks hideous. We wouldn't want that with that font, but they changed this a little bit, but you'll click on the share button, and then right here, you'll click on download. And what Justin said was very accurate. So think about the type of file. A JPEG is pretty good, but if you put a JPEG at the lowest quality, it's going to be pretty grainy. You don't need a huge high resolution image with a lot of pixels, because buttons are fairly small on a page. They're not going to be like full screen, 1,000 pixels. But that being said, you don't want to get into that super small size. And once you do that, you're just going to click download. And then when you go back to your class, you can either upload that when you go to edit your main page. You can upload by bringing in an image. You could put that in your Files tab, and then as Justin was getting at, you click on that image, you go to the hyperlink option. You could do an external link or an internal class link, and all of a sudden then you have buttons. It's that easy. You can get fancy, but it's super easy to do the buttons. So for those of you that liked the old City Labs Design Tool Plus, whatever it was, I think you'll find that this is pretty easy. It involves a few more steps, but to be quite honest with you, what I do in my classes, I create some stock images. I like these word clouds. So for my course image, my main image, I like having, I lost it there, but I'll go to my settings. I like having a word cloud. So this is something I customize for every single class, and then I just have that as a stock image that I save inside of Canvas. You could do that same thing like Justin did for his buttons, and then have those every time you import your previous class into your new class. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. All of that will be there for you. You can change some links there very easily, but I think it's a smart way. I probably need to have something like that as opposed to my front page. In this case, I just have the module showing up, but with some other classes, I sometimes have used buttons in the past. I just haven't recently. So it's really up to you. Whatever you think is going to work for you and your students, go with that system. But if you like using buttons, it's another way to establish, as we saw with Justin's class there, another way to establish a sense of order and navigation and clarity at the beginning of the class when you first log on as a student. I think it's super easy to use this because there isn't a mystery about what to do, right? If you want a video on the homepage, you can do that as well. And anything really could be here. Probably like we're talking about with our navigation menu, maybe you wouldn't want, 15 buttons. I think having 3 or 5 or whatever is probably a good idea. Some people have just one button and it says start the class. So you could go to Canva, as we talked about, and specifically look for, go in the menu here and type the word start or get started, and you will, have something that pops up. It could be, a graphic like this, or it could be more of a clip art thing. And then that could be your graphic, and the students click on that, they start the class. Whatever you want to do, whatever works for you. Play around with it. I think it's a great opportunity also to learn some tech skills. I love working with Canva. It's super easy to use, and it does some great graphics, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel and find free graphics for mythology on the web. And just about anything that you type in here, you will get a hit for. I have the pro version, which the college pays for, but even with the free version, you find a lot of stuff. So if I click on anthropology, I can find some, that's not very useful, but some evolutionary diagram, or if I'm teaching forensic anthro, I have a skull, and it's super easy to use. This is all you have to do. You drag around, you delete stuff with your delete key, and then you save it as your file. So it's super easy to use. You can change all the colors by going in here and changing the color scheme of things, and it's literally that easy. So great opportunity, I think, to use Canva to make your buttons like Justin has done here. So I think that's it probably on the navigation side of things here.